I want to put one of my predictions on the record. It seems to me over the last 10 to 15 years, actually, even since before that, a lot of the things that I've kind of predicted will happen in the world of wellness, so to speak. And then as my practice and my work grew, culture and psychological safety and all the things that I talk about now, a lot of them have happened, most of them, if not all of them, actually. So just for fun, I'm going to put something on the record here about where I think all of this is headed and which organizations I feel will be light years ahead of the rest 10 years from now if they start to adopt some of these things. Not all of this will feel like a popular opinion or maybe even not necessarily comfortable, depending, what policies and what movements you are attached to right now. But it's the overall concept that I really want to get across here, and where I really think corporations who are going to win in the end, by valuing human capital firstly and foremostly, because you don't have any other capital if you don't have the humans to work it, right? And it comes from something that I am working on here in southern Manitoba right now. I won't share a lot of details about it, but with some partners and some other potential partners, we're looking at a workforce and community development strategy that addresses and opens up and works with the reality of the intersectionality of this. There's no strong workforce if we don't have healthy communities, and there are no healthy communities if we don't have functional families and functional individuals. We don't have functional families unless we have people, adults, teens, and young children who have been taught to regulate their emotions. It is the source of the majority of the excessive violence and dysfunction that we see. I could take you on a neurobiology lesson back to the 80s and explain why the main style of parenting back then is largely responsible for this, although it has been around for quite some time. Not to criticize parents in the 80s, because I was raised in that. Most of us were. This is more of a when we know better, we do better scenario, not for blame, just to accept responsibility. And we know better now. We understand the neurobiology of parenting and nervous systems and brain development. And so much of the expense that falls on corporations now, because our healthcare system is too overwhelmed at this point, the cost has now been transferred onto business owners in this great country of ours. They're the last ones to pay for it, unfortunately. If we understand the intersectionality of these things, and if a business, group of businesses or region of businesses, which is what we're looking at here, understand that their workforce is made up of the people in the community, which is made up of the families, which is made up of the individuals that work for them and that are raising these families, or the single people that don't have families but that were raised in other families. If they understand the direct impact of parenting on their workforce 20 years later, they're going to start looking at policies and programs differently. And they're going to look at, I think one of the strategies that's going to emerge in leadership teams that are willing to ask the hard questions and look at some of these things. I think one of the strategies is actually going to be to look at the demographic working for them that is interested and willing to do the work to actually heal, to go on a healing journey. And I think when you start to focus on parenting, families, community, results in our workforce, a lot of the other things and the policies and all of the programs and all of the things that have come for justifiable reasons from the movements, right, of looking for equality and, diversity and inclusion and all of those things, those are good things, but those things create band-aids on a much deeper wound that goes much further down and is rooted in a very different part of our society. Because when you suddenly have a generation of kids whose parents understood co-regulation and emotional regulation, whose parents healed themselves as best they could, so that in a sense, a lot of us have had to learn how to reparent ourselves. And those people raise a new generation of children that can emotionally regulate themselves. We're going to have substantially less health problems. We're going to have way less conflict in the workplace. You're going to have way less investigations into harassment, because our lack of emotional regulation systemically in our society, and our lack of trauma-informed knowledge about those things, and our habit of pathologizing the entire human experience and slapping pills on it instead of healing the source underneath it, that's the mess. And it's really not that hard. Someone just has to put the path and the map to that together. Most people out there doing that work are pioneering and setting the path on their own and trying to figure out what they need. If they are fortunate to run into someone like me, I can help them with that path and that strategy. I've had to be on my own path and strategy too, and it is in my work and it is in my keynotes and everything that I do. But when we as a community that is a workforce, that is a business community, understand the intersectionality of all of those things, and we make that path more accessible, instead of splitting everything up between our culture policies and our DEI and our psychological safety, and I love all those things, I do. We needed all the pieces of the puzzle, and our culture policies, our wellness programs, EAP, mental health in the workplace, like, oh my goodness, who can even keep track of all of that? When all of that gets distilled down to, this is what lies underneath it. Poor emotional regulation leads to the majority of the problems that we're facing, and some of the horrible things that happen, the chronic diseases that build up over time, and all of the environments that we live in and work in, and what is created in those, and the toxicity of those. And I honestly, if you were just going to give me like a company of 500 to 1,000 people, and I try to identify how many people were actually willing to do the work and were interested and were already spending tons of discretionary income on top of their benefits to try to heal, because that is what people are trying to do. And you just put it all into one, and you created a space and accessibility, a bit of a map where everything is, and some understanding of what healing actually is and how to do it. That is going to be way more effective than all the other things that we've been throwing money at for decades at this point. That's what people want. They just want to feel better. And those that cause a lot of problems were never taught to regulate their emotions, because that is taught in childhood. That is not an excuse, just to be clear, to be abusive or violent, because there is a lot of people that weren't taught those things that are not. I'm not touching that. I feel very strongly about the pathologization of the entire human experience that has happened, and then how, when it suits, it is used as an excuse to be abusive. And so I'm not into that. I highly oppose that. That's for another day. So that's where I see there is a linchpin. That is where I see there is a massive ROI. I'm not saying that, your leadership team could just sit down and imagine this right away, but I will also say that's actually what we are imagining here in the region, to try to understand how I can sit here and know what people need, and where the areas and all that kind of stuff. But the trick is, and where the service is, and where the humility has to be and the ego has to be checked, is I can know step by step exactly what someone needs to heal, but my job isn't to tell them all those steps. My job is to give them an opportunity to choose and to create an environment where it is safe to do so. And timing matters. And so many other things matter. I won't dive into all the things we're working on right now, but that's what it's kind of distilling down to. And so I think not even just businesses or big corporations that will win, be winning in 5 to 10 years from now, but entire communities. When an entire business community and leadership in an area comes together and agrees that their workforce is fully reliant on a healthy community, and that healthy community is fully reliant on functional families. And functional families, with the state that we're in now, require some healing, some understanding of emotional regulation, and some trauma-informed parenting strategies. Because if the US Surgeon General is declaring parenting a health crisis, oh my God, like, we're there. There is an end to what the biology can take. There is an end to what the soul can take. The number one killer in so many demographics right now is suicide, because there is an end to what we can take, and we are there. And someone and some groups and some places have to forge a path through. This is how we get back there. And here is support to do it. And again, these people, people in your organization that are already doing the work and are already investing the time and the money into it, you need to harness that power. Because once they regulate better, do you know what they do to the other nervous systems in the office? They bring their regulation up. They create psychological safety. The stress response comes down, the cortisol comes down, the damage to the intestinal membranes comes down, and the immune systems come back up just with that. Okay, it's got long, but I just wanted to put it on the record. I don't know if anyone was going to watch right till the end, but that is the long version of what we are distilling down into what we're working on here and what the goals are. And I guess we're just going to kind of see if it works, see what happens.